This Budapest Business Journal videocast was recorded at the BBJ's CEO Boardroom meeting held at the Matild Palace Hotel on June the 16th, 2022. The Boardroom Roundtable looked at the primary drivers influencing the Hungarian economy this summer. It features John Ford, Managing Director at GoTo Hungary, Rezső Rózsai, CEO of KPMG Hungary, and Erik Slooten, Global Leader of Delivery Quality and Transformation Cloud Services at T-Systems International. Questions are asked by Robin Marshall, the Editor-in-Chief of the Budapest Business Journal. Thank you for watching this BBJ videocast. I should say, before we start, that when we did the first of these roundtable discussions in February, Erik was one of our guests, and so were you, John, I believe. No?
I was enjoying breakfast.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I meant by our guest. Yeah. You were down there. Thank you very much.
I was definitely enjoying breakfast.
Rezső should have been one of our participants in the conversation, but in an unwelcome but perhaps timely reminder that COVID may have gone away, but not completely away. He was unable to join us thanks to COVID. I'm delighted you could make it today. Thank you very much. Welcome to all three of you. As ever, I would like to start by setting some context for this conversation. Let's start where we think we are, gentlemen. We know the risk factors. We know what's out there. We have war. We have inflation, which has hit, I believe, a 23-year high. We have rising energy costs, we have rising raw material costs, we have supply chain issues, and many of those are interlinked processes, interconnected processes. But let's start with bearing in mind all of that and the imponderables there. What do we think our expectations for economic growth this year will be for Hungary? Are we talking about 4%, less, more? Should we be optimistic? Should we be pessimistic? Should we just be realistic? And then, with this cast it a little further forward, what about next year? Let's start, Rezső. As you should have been here last time, and you are the consultant of the group. Let's start with you. Could you please give us your overview of where we are?
Thank you. Hungary used to be the country of 10 million football experts. And since our football team is performing reasonably well currently, we need another topic. And now we became the country of 10 million macroeconomists. Everybody is analyzing the macroeconomic situation. We do it at KPMG as well, both locally and globally. And in the executive summary, that there is an uncertainty. And if you see the prognosis of various experts in Hungary, I think the percentage they gave us for this year, for a yearly basis, is from 2.6 to almost 6%, which is unusually a broad range. So that shows us that the circumstances are really uncertain. So first of all, there is the benchmark impact. So we have to know that the first half year of the last year was still under lockdown. So if you ask the people here in the hotel how many guests they had in the first half year, they will tell you a really low number, and the same is for some other economists as well. So this is one thing, and this is also, of course, the reason of one of the highest reason for the really unusually high first quarter growth, which is of course not sustainable for a yearly range. And the second half year is not only at a risk due to the benchmark impact, but also of course there is still a war in the neighborhood. There is still a supply chain, serious supply chain difficulties. We do have the inflation with us. We do have higher interest rates. And especially in Hungary, we have two other impacts. One is a negative impact, is the EU. funds frozen, which is a question how the discussions between the Hungarian government and the EU will be closed, hopefully soon with success. This is really important. And the second are the elections, because we had elections, and an election year is always a year of extraordinary spendings, and we did have some. And the positive impact of those spendings are also shown in our economic growth. So the consumption is still on a really high level. You can experience this any time when you are going to a shopping center. It's almost full, and people are spending their earnings like there is no tomorrow. So, and the balance of all of those factors is the big question. So, if I have to say a number, because I think you expect a number from an accountant, I would say the 4% is still reasonable. And this is significantly higher than any countries in the region.
Which is an important point, of course. I'm interested also in how this plays out with our CEO. So, Erik, what's your view?
So, yeah, I tend to agree that this year we won't see the real economic impact of what's happening around us just yet. There's still enough pipeline momentum ongoing. In some cases, Hungary is also the easy alternative for problems that are happening, in the Western countries. So, and because of the fact that Russia has become such a big challenge, you see European countries putting their differences aside and saying, okay, well, then we just need to kind of solve it inside of Europe. So I think that's all helping us. I can see it inside of our group, but also with our customers that, Hungary and all the other, let's say, Central European contenders are not suffering so much from the business that is being offered to us. Yes, which is good news for now. But the problem is that we don't, the conditions are changing inside of Hungary from a labor perspective. The labor market has become so unstable and so volatile, and the costs are growing out of control. And this is partially because people are making more money-based decisions, so loyalty is becoming lower because they see the cost going up, they see inflation going up, so employees will say, whereas I stuck with you for the last 10 years because you're a good company, you've been taking care of me, now I'm going to look out for number one. So the financial component of that decision of changing jobs or, accepting a different career path is much higher than before. But also the numbers are going up. Yeah, so we're no longer competing with either the international companies present here or local companies, but now German or French or Italian companies are offering jobs to people here and tell them you don't need to move, you can stay where you are, because the pressure on them in the Netherlands or in Germany is so high now that they don't have answers anymore in their local markets, so they'll invite people to work from home since the whole COVID thing has broken through that now. And as long as it's within Europe, it's considered to be a safe zone for people to be deployed. And a lot of people that have achieved good skills and good language skills are now benefiting from that. And I think that, so this year we're feeling that, and people are complaining, customers are complaining, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think that if we don't find a way to control that and find good answers, be more aggressive in stymieing these problems, we will pay dearly. And the momentum will shift away from Hungary as an investment opportunity, because the main reason, besides infrastructure, which has become a lot better in the last few years, if Europe doesn't hurry up with coming to an agreement with Hungary, or Hungary doesn't hurry up with coming to an agreement with Europe, depends on which perspective you look at it, I guess. And the labor market becomes as volatile as it is, and the costs are no longer really an alternative anymore, because like if this 20 to 30% salary hike that is happening right now across, the whole labor market continues, you are on Austrian or, German levels in a few years' time. So then what's your competitive advantage? So we have to find ways to either really, really compensate the cost problem with content and other conditions that we can create here that make us attractive, because we're no longer the nearshoring location, but then us as leaders, as well as the local policymakers, have to put our heads together as to what that agenda should look like. Yeah, it's no longer just automatic. And I think next year, so maybe we will do the 4%. I agree with you, but I think a combination of us not finding good answers to those challenges locally, as well as, I don't want to be the doom preacher here, but all indicators globally are saying that within 12 months we have a global economic crisis, and that will hurt us. As we look at our trade balance and how much we're dependent on foreign investment, that will hurt us tremendously. It's 30% of our economy is foreign money, so that's obvious that if the world is in crisis, our economy will be in crisis. So I think this will be the last growth year, but we have to absolutely invest in measures that are gonna safeguard us through the very tough times ahead.
I know there are too many imponderables, but do you have a working scenario for what you expect for next year in terms of growth?
Yeah,
or no growth?
Yeah, so we don't count with growth for next year. We count with like we're in a large group, so we're trying to find answers together with other solution countries. We're trying to decrease the blast radius. So, for instance, Hungary was by far the biggest. Yeah, so it's 5,000 people. So I'm trying to diversify into more countries rather than less. So that if our cloud, if the problem is not business, we still have business, because in IT since the 90s, it's never been a problem. There's always a reason to give more business to IT. So that has never. And there's always more people that don't understand computers than there are people that understand them. So it's that's always a good thing. But if the economic crisis hits, the behavior on the local market, the availability of labor, the skills, and to be able to react fast, because right now recruiting people or finding smart people or getting people from the Ukraine or Russia even into Hungary, it takes half a year or more. It's too slow. We need to find ways to shift gear faster as a business. So that way we kind of diversify, going into Brazil, Mexico, India, Slovakia, not Russia obviously anymore. Turkey is one of the options as well, and see how we can kind of build global leadership, or at least international leadership here or in Germany, and work across a network. So if one of these markets gets hit harder, we're not completely, the word. It's being broadcasted, so I'm trying not to.
Yeah, and we've got lots of diplomats, and that wouldn't be diplomatic.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Talking of people who understand computers, John, and also a business that's built around having people working from home. That's very much part of your DNA now. And perhaps of the three of you here, you have the deepest insight into America, which gives us a different perspective as well. What's your view, your expectations for this year and your expectations for next?
Yeah, okay, so firstly, thanks very much, Rezső, for bringing up the football.
Yeah, thanks,
I was hoping we would be able to keep that topic off the table, but well played Hungary last week, and I sincerely hope the Hungarian economy performs as well as the Hungarian football team did against England. But I would echo a lot of the sentiments that Erik expressed, and I'm a born optimist, but I kind of don't really see anything but kind of tougher days, and certainly in America, they're battening down the hatches and getting ready for a storm. They're laying off people. Startups are, very much reducing headcount according to the amount of runway that their cash funding can extend for them in the short term. And, typically as a tech company, software company, startups are kind of our main competitors. So, that is actually going to open up more talent for us to hire. But if I keep it on a macro level, I think because this has been an extended boom and probably twice as long as, a typical kind of 7-year cycle would usually be, I think we have engaged in a bit of Strutzpolitiker. We've had our head in the sand, and a lot of people can't really remember the 2008 days or the times before, which were arguably tougher. So I think 4% is a very optimistic view. I would say, nearer 3, but I could see it tailing off towards the end because, these forecasts do tend to go down. So I would probably, if I was going to bet, I'd probably say 2.5, to be honest. I think some of the longer term effects of what we're seeing, so although the published inflation rate is, 8.5%, I think the real inflation rate is higher than that. If the cap on petrol is removed, which frankly, if there's anyone here from OMV or Shell, I'm not sure how your company is still in existence, but once they get rid of that R-stop, that's going to drive inflation a lot higher. And we're all going to feel that. I think that probably some of the longer term effects, for a smaller economy which is very dependent on foreign funding, we're going to be hit quite hard. Now, obviously, not obviously, but in the tech sector, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because we're still a cost-efficient location, and if anything, in the terms of when a recession comes, people try and move cost out. So we've been doubling our headcount here in Hungary, and I've moved teams from California to Hungary for obvious reasons. So that's not necessarily a bad thing for me and my company. But I think there's quite a big elephant in the room in terms of, and Erik alluded to it, and that's the exchange rate and the kind of continued collapse of the forint, to put it bluntly. And, if we could unlock this technicality and unleash another 7 billion euros of EU funding onto the market, which we as Hungary did a very good deal in negotiating, we haven't done a very good deal in kind of building those bridges and ensuring that the money gets paid. And I'm not sure, however hopeful and optimistic we can be, I'm not sure that that's getting any closer. So if I look at the actual purchasing power parity of this 2.5%, it's going down, and I think anyone who goes on holiday this summer is going to realize how weak the forint is. And so even the wage inflation that we're seeing, coupled with the collapse of the forint, it's just totally negated. I think in terms of, working from home, and companies in Italy or Netherlands or UK probably not UK after Brexit, but, after looking to save money by using remote workers in Hungary, that's only going to become more attractive once they're converting a foreign salary into euros. And so I've got my LastPass executive team over in Hungary this week, and they are astounded at how cheap we are for the quality. And this is really the wrong way round. When you have a defined talent pool, as we do in this country, it's 9.5 million, 9 million. It's not growing. Population's going down. So we should be looking to upgrade. And we've got some great quality talent here. So wage inflation is not bad, because it's a value mix, and if we're offering good quality at good value, but if we're paying everyone in forints and that's just collapsing in the background, then it doesn't work. So unfortunately, I'm not as optimistic as I usually am on this one, probably.
I do hope we haven't ruined breakfast for you all out there.
Everybody stop eating.
Just a thought that occurred to me, John, as you were talking about paying people in forints. Have you considered paying people in euros or dollars? Or?
Yes, yeah, we have. We have, and we're looking at that kind of more and more seriously. I would say a couple of things. So, the flip side of an economic recession, it's I'm a sailor and I like to see everything in sailing metaphors, and it's never failed once. So, when the wind changes direction,
we are a landlocked country.
You tack your boat, and obviously, there's opportunities to be taken in a recession. So, if my company is growing fast, it's very profitable, a lot of cash in the bank, and this is a safe place to be. It's a safe harbour when a recession hits. So I think if you're going to look at how to attract or retain employees, you don't necessarily jump to the most kind of you can kind of stick to the policies you've got and play to your strong points. But yeah, we are looking more and more seriously. I think the tipping point is going to be how dangerous the competition of people moving abroad or working for foreign companies becomes. And at the moment, we're only seeing a few examples, to be honest. So I had someone from my team this week leave because he's Irish and he says, I need to earn euros. But, that's 1 out of 600. So if we see that starting to really, really grow, then we will push paying in euros or dollars, but probably euros given that we're in Europe.
It's interesting. Several years ago, maybe 8 years ago, wearing a different hat, I used to know a lot of radiographers, which is a very niche thing, but there was a real problem in Hungary with having radiographers, the people who read the scans, because they could get paid just to sit at home and read these scans through. And and as far as I know, that's still the case. Most hospitals in Hungary now are understaffed in terms of radiography. And you can go to some places, there's at least one Norwegian hospital that I know of where the entire radiography department is Hungarian, and when there's no Norwegian doctor present, they speak in Hungarian. So there are these issues. Rezső, I'd like to bring you in on this, because KPMG is not a small organisation, but also you look across this, across many industries. Hungary isn't anywhere near the euro anytime soon. Do you see the possibility that maybe more companies will look at keeping staff, deciding the way to keep staff here is to protect their incomes by perhaps paying them in euros rather than forints?
I would answer this question more broadly. So I'm not sure how many requests you have received recently from your suppliers to change your HUF-based contract to euro-based or dollar-based contract. So we see a lot of examples on the market, and this is a process which is implementing euro de facto in Hungary. So as long as our official currency remains the HUF, and we are getting not near to the euro, but in the real economy is turning to euro. And it was always, and if you have an unstable exchange rate, you have a high inflation. We remember the early 90s and late 90s. Basically, the major contracts were always denominated in euro, or that time in German mark. And this is coming back. And this will cause a really interesting situation, because the taxes are still paid in forint. So whether with the weak exchange rate, you can pay the low taxes in forint, which are like 20%, losing 20% from their value if the trend continues in a euro term. As long the real economy is changing, they functional currency to euro. So this is a trend which you can see, and this could have a significant impact on the politics as well, and or behaviors towards the euro conversion.
Somebody who is it? Croatia is about to join. Does that put pressure on Hungary, do you think?
Yes and no. So as long as you consider you are sitting in Düsseldorf or somewhere in Germany and you are somehow evaluating the performance of your Hungarian operation and you just see, okay, wage inflation in euro was not that significant. So if they convert it to euro and comparing it to the last 2 years, they do not experience a huge increase as long as they are selling their products in euro. And as long as they have the people in Hungary, which is as we discussed, getting more and more a problem, this is an advantage for the country. However, talking about the other part of the economy, which is not the production, the euro is getting more and more a denominated functional currency and causing a disadvantage for Hungary by side selections.
However, is probably one of the most important words in the English language. Erik, I ought to extend that question to you as well. Considering, I mean, you have a much bigger German base than John does, so you perhaps see this through a different perspective.
So it's been discussed, but it's nowhere near a decision because a complexity of our group is also making it hard to make. Like if you make that decision for Hungary, it has to do it for every other country in Europe at least, and we have like 10 sites, large sites where. So this is almost like making decisions in the European Union. You know, it's like a lot of people, a lot of conditions, and so it takes time. But yeah, an interesting discussion we had a few years ago when this wasn't really a thing yet. Is that there's a lot of money, like hedging done inside groups like ours with just currency exchange fluctuations and changes and not necessarily always good for the group, right? So it might be an advantage for Hungary for a few years, but the group is actually losing money on this if you look at it on a fact base. So there has been an open discussion to see if we could kind of create our own kind of crypto coin system inside to eliminate a lot of these internal chargings and fluctuation in currency exchange, because the local CFOs were usually playing the numbers game with the currency exchange, and this becomes a more relevant discussion. So if you're under this kind of pressure anyway, and you could eliminate that discussion by creating something that is stable for all employees inside your group, and that would make them stronger towards whatever they need to spend then locally, that would be an answer. It could be either one. So I think paying people in euros is safe bet, but it's very hard to implement. So it will cost a lot of money in consulting and tax advisors, and so we really have to trade off the implementation costs versus the benefits. And if you're going to do something like that anyway, why not? If you're as large as we are, or like some of the other large groups here, why not look at a much more a cryptocurrency or a system that actually makes you strong and independent, and that will also cost money and a lot of time, but at least you're solving the problem more permanently. Yeah. So it's just discussions and thoughts, and we're having active on the Deutsche Telekom leadership level. We are having very extensive and long discussions about this, but it's not something that I would say is anywhere near decision time. But there are also like wholesale discussions on cryptocurrency right now, where they want to, like, between networks, they're currently also selling each other minutes, bandwidth, whatever. This is like happening since the 80s. And also they're suffering this overhead and this unpredictability of currency problem. So they've already had some agreements that between networks, they have a kind of a fake currency that is always constant. So at least they can manage the cost and the price between them. And then it's just pure negotiation, like commercial, instead of being dependent on a fluctuating currency, which makes life harder in general. So it's a discussion we're having. Yes.
We and thank you for sharing that insight with us. We went somewhere I didn't expect to go, so thank you, John. And by the way, if you are looking for consultancy advice, I believe Rezső stands ready to help.
I heard they do stuff.
We covered a lot of ground in my first question, so I'm going to skip. And there is some stuff that I really want to get onto, but there is a very serious bottleneck, and we've talked about it in part, which is the labour restrictions. So perhaps we all know that we have the joy of being in a country that has full economy, which also has its challenges. So let's talk less about that and more about perhaps the future workforce. Although I do worry that this may go down negative territory as well. Do you, as employers, and Rezső, you're both an employer and a consultant, do you fear that the system is fit for purpose? Can it produce the workers that this country needs at the skill levels that they need to do the jobs that will be coming that perhaps aren't defined yet? So do you have confidence that in 5 years' time, or no, maybe a bit more than that, 10 years' time, there will be the workforce available in Hungary that people around these tables need?
Talking first about the quantities, this is easier. If you see the statistics, then demographically we are decreasing. So I think 40,000 people are missing every year from the Hungarian population. This is 80,000 currently for the generations who are active on the labor market. So this is a hell lot. And we are growing. We have been growing in the last couple of years. This is a question, of course, for the future. But I just remember two announcements from the government just before the elections. One is that we are planning a significant growth in the next 2-3 years, and that we have full employment. And the question is, okay, who is driving the growth then? Hopefully technology, which I'm really supporting. But so we have a quantitative issue first. Mm-hmm. And this brings you to the topic that the government is solving it from supporting the families, and I think they are performing quite well on this, I have to be honest. But it's still not enough. Mm. So it's and not a medium-term solution. This is for the long term, it's a really important decision, but for the medium term, it's not a solution. So as we discussed, we are importing people to Hungary, and this is still really difficult. So getting on boarded somebody outside from the European Union is 4 to 6 months. This is unacceptably high. You need to be significantly more flexible. The other is the skill set. I think this question cannot be answered like comprehensively, because there are sectors where the skill set is really well, I would say, so well defined, and the execution is also quite in a high quality. But there are other sectors where this is not the case. From graduates, university graduates, you can see that there are certain models. So from the engineers, they took the German model with this dual education system, I think driven by the main automotive companies, and this model looks to be successful. The big issue was, I think, a couple of years ago that they tried to take this model for the other industries as well, independently, whether the sector has any specialties or not. So it was like the economic universities wanted to send people to the audit companies for the summer. I was very well. They were very welcome, but nobody will be there because the audit season has a certain seasonality. So the good news is that we experiencing a dialogue from the universities. So I never attended that many meetings with universities that in the last year. So I'm even this year, I think I met 3 times the Corvinus University's dean, chairman, and they are approaching us for views, for a vision, which is good, a good direction. So for the graduates, a dialogue at least started. Whether this will have a success in a short term, I'm not that confident. For the other labor market, so what I'm really missing is the tech industry. So I would say if if I would like, this is my personal opinion. If I'm opening my iPhone and want to purchase food, want to purchase electronic, using a taxi, whatever, there are a lot of good examples from the region. We have a lot of companies from Czech, Slovakia, Poland, from Estonia, but we are not using too many Hungarian apps. And this is somehow a feedback for how perhaps the education system should be changed. And this is also a personal comment from my side that the biggest thing I miss from the current government is an education ministry. And it's a very good news that we have an innovation and technology ministry, and maybe adding the education as a third responsibility to ministry would have be reasonable. We don't know the backgrounds why it did not happen, but I think this is something that the education system needs to be in the focus.
Yeah, we will come to the ministries towards the end, but yes, I think it's very noticeable. Education doesn't have its own ministry. Health doesn't have its own ministry, and there are all sorts of justifications about that, but there are also all sorts of questions. Let's talk about apps then, John. Why aren't you making more apps?
Well,
since you do make apps, but perhaps that's an unfair question. Are you happy that you can still move those jobs from California here, or in 2 years' time, are you going to run out of people to do that?
So I'm going to shock you all and say we have no issues attracting talent here. We don't have hiring issues at all. I would say that zooming in and out, so at the global level, last 2 or 3 decades, the world has been going through a digital transformation. So every company has either become a software company or become totally dependent on software. So we should absolutely not be surprised that we're looking for more and more software people. Now, within software, I've been working in software like 30 years, and I would say it's definitely not harder to hire now than it was in the late 90s. So coming up to the Y2K issue, I mean, we used to joke, if you could spell SAP, you can become an SAP consultant. And it's less difficult, so I wouldn't say it's easier, because easy makes it seem easy. It's always been difficult, because the world is going through a global transformation. So kind of going from global to macro, the only thing that will really create a greater pool of talent is higher productivity. And it's kind of obvious, but what we're not doing here is making those tough choices. So we're talking about investments that create jobs, and it's the wrong mindset. You want an investment that doesn't create jobs. So I remember setting up a factory in Poland. We closed 5 factories, 1 in France, 2 in the UK, and a couple in Spain, and replaced them with a factory in Poland. And each of those factories we closed had 250, 300 people. The factory in Poland ran with 16 people to create the same output as the 5 we closed, which had 1,000 people between them. So that's what you want to do. Use the technology to drive productivity for the same economic output. But it takes tough choices, because you need to go out there and say, you know what, you 300 people, you're losing your job, so that these 16 people can take it. And but the 300 people, there's plenty of open roles. They can probably go and do something better. So if I then kind of zoom down to why I say we don't have an issue, is that at LogMeIn last year, we hired 260 people. So that's like 1 per day, roughly, per business day. But across GoTo and LastPass, so far this year, we're hiring at a rate of 10 to 20 per week. So that's, at least 2 or 3 per day. So that's twice as many. So it's definitely not getting worse.
And sorry, and that's not just in Budapest. So you're
I'm
also
talking
recruiting
Hungary.
Szeged.
Yeah. So we're remote centric. So we're hiring all over the country, obviously. So I have teams in Pécs, Szeged, but to be honest, we're all working remotely, so it could be anywhere. And that's where taking away that physical restriction. Obviously, we've done a lot of, transformational work, so we've rearranged the portfolio, and, there are certain things where you've got to know your playing field. You know, you've got to make it meaningful work and interesting, etc. And we've got a great brand, all of that stuff. But I think that's always been the case, certainly in software. And I think if I look, so I've worked in about 40 different countries, and I would say it's definitely not harder to hire here. And that's why you see a lot of people coming into Hungary, because it's actually easier to hire software or tech talent here. And if I talk to my colleagues in, you know, London, Paris, Germany, they're like, don't even bother posting a role. You won't have any applicants, you know, unless you're going to pay an executive search consultant to go out and find that person. But then in a time of economic downturn, how do you convince them to switch? Mm-hmm. So I am, you know, I'm happy with the talent here. Rezső touched on education. And if the talent market is a mindset issue, because I think it should be productivity, not number of jobs, I would say education is a philosophical question. And, you know, if I think about, so I studied German and Russian, as you probably know, so if you need someone to analyze 18th century Russian poetry, I'm probably your man, but it doesn't pay very well. And I would say, you know, are we using education to create the future workforce generation to drive growth and economic productivity? Or are we taking the opportunity to give a wide range of knowledge and skills which they wouldn't otherwise gain elsewhere? You know, so I love history. In my free time, I read about the Napoleonic Wars. But that's not my job, and it doesn't bring any economic benefit. So it's a philosophical question of, you know, are we investing in the future of the economy? Personally, I think you should do both. So, you know, I see no reason at all why we don't teach 10-year-olds basic Java coding. You know, it's probably easier than learning French. I learned to code when I was 10. It's not a magic, it's not a black art in any way. It's actually quite straightforward and simple. You just can't get by gesticulating. So you can do both.
Has it changed since you were 10, which is just yesterday? Has the coding that you learned when you were 10, is that the same coding they're teaching now?
So many of the technologies are the same. So Java for the back end, JavaScript for the front end. The tech stack has changed and it's become easier to learn. So there's frameworks in place, there's cheat sheets, for want of a better word, which catch your mistakes. I used to code in Notepad, whereas now, you know, it's not free form. It's easier. It's really significantly easier. I was going to say about when knowing your playing field, you know, there are some skill sets which here in Hungary just don't exist. And, you know, you should just bat those things away. So one good example is Ruby on Rails never really caught on here. So if someone in America asks me to form a Ruby on Rails team, I'm like, no, you'll just open the roles and they'll stay open for years. So take it to India. So you've got to know the playing field as well.
I have no idea what Ruby on Rails is. I probably don't need to know. Erik, where do you stand on education? Are you hopeful or not?
So I was going to answer the labor. Do we have labor?
Then
because we're on the opposite. Like John is in a kind of growing status. We're in the biggest, like in the IT market in Hungary, and so we're on the opposite end. Yeah, we're being attacked by everyone else to come after the talent. It's really hard. It's really hard to hold on to the talent, especially now that the competition is kind of expanded to countries that no longer require people to move. Our attrition has gone, it's doubled since last 1.5 years. Let's say during the first part of COVID, it was lower because nobody wanted to move. And then when that effect wore off, it went from 11%, which has been stable for 3 years, to 14, 15, and now it's on to above 20. So it's really, really high. So 1 in 5 leaves every month, basically. So it's really, really hard to hold on. That's Indian attrition levels. So we have to change our entire way of doing stuff, basically around people management and recruiting and retention, and so the whole mantra has to be rethought. And I do strongly agree. I think we should be more specific about the productivity part. So I think that this whole people-based services is, it's not even only for Hungary, but for the world. It's not an answer because, yes, we're still growing as a population, but not in the countries like where we are from. So we need to find either a very good way of, collaborating with China and India, which are the only real sources for growth in population, or we need to robotize like crazy. Okay, and so tonight I'm talking on the Dutch Chamber of Commerce on AI, but so I've been a strong advocate in the company as well as in the group on, being much more aggressive in breaking through, barriers on robotization and AI, because that will make it will make us even more dependent on software, but it will make us much less dependent on something that we cannot control. So I think, there is and it's also a much more sustainable answer to growing business. So if you can digitize and robotize and use AI in offering services without having to, necessarily grow your install base of employees, that is a more sustainable way of providing services. So we are very strongly looking at that more aggressively. That would be my top priority. Number two, is that we need to be more flexible in bringing foreign talent in. And we had this conversation twice now, or 3 times. It is the main limiting factor, and we're far too restrictive on this. And it depends on as a government, what you want to achieve. If you just want to be really popular with your local base, then I guess this is as good as it gets, and we won't get any more productive or growing. If you want to create a platform for productivity and creativity, you must bring in the foreigners. There is no other way of doing it. In this small group, which is declining 80,000 per year, which is huge for a small country, and where we know that the birth rates are still going down despite all the policies and promoting, paying people to have children, all of that. It's been tried. It's not working. It's not working anywhere, so it's not working here either. So I would strongly advocate, albeit, it can be business related, like we discussed, like business migration, saying if you have a job here, if I have 50,000 open engineering positions in Hungary or something like that, that was the last number I saw, and you have an opportunity to add this talent to your labor pool, and you have an opportunity to boost off of the back of that the rest of the labor pool and inspire them and challenge them and educate them, why would you not do that? There's only this kind of philosophical, ideological reason not to do that. But from a business perspective, I am not a politician, I'm a businessman. So from a business perspective, there's no good reason not to do that. I cannot think of any, especially knowing that there's still a growing demand curve towards Hungary. Despite all the arguments and differences in Europe, there's still a demand coming towards Hungary. So you must very fast. Education is a problem and needs to be solved, but it's going to solve it like 10 years down the road, not now. And we're heading for a crisis. We need to be as strong as we possibly can be. We need to be able to shift gear as fast as we can. So for me, short-term measures are key. So making it easier for foreigners to come and work here, contract-based, very, very fast, very low thresholds, independently of nationality, but based on pure talent, must be, for me, from a business perspective, must be a priority.
Yeah, just to add, so the growing demand curve, I could have hired twice as many people last year. And the only limit is, onboarding, knowledge transfer, cultural assimilation, etc. So it's almost endless if the people were there. So another option, which, we don't discuss very often, is cross-training. Upskilling, training, adult education, cross-training.
Yeah, but that we do all that. Yeah, so I've been doing that for 5 years. All this whole skilling machine, But again, also there, that's slow. Yeah. So like if I take someone who's a art history major and get them to write good code, okay, it may have, it's principally still the same, but it's still kind of evolving really fast. It takes, on a very optimistic HR, policy level, at least 6 months to get them to baby steps. So you cannot replace someone who's an experienced DevOps engineer on a specific platform with someone who's done like help desks.
Rezső, did you want to jump in there?
I think it's the labor market is changing, and also the advantages of Hungary are getting different. So if I take an own example, KPMG, so we are developing a global delivery network now, and we are not considering Hungary anymore as a pure labor-intense location. So we are only moving tasks to Hungary, which include a higher percentage of technology, and like this is the way how we should move forward. So there are locations you mentioned, India, China. I think there are some African locations who are really demanding work, and they offer really good labor, good quality labor, I would say. And this is somehow, I think, a global optimization on these processes for those global companies as Deutsche Telekom. I think they are in the position to somehow move ahead on this and reconsider the value proposition for Hungary and reconsider for other countries. So I think since COVID, the borders are not with us. So you can do anything in the online environment, and this is maybe the only one, or at least the biggest positive input of COVID, that you can think absolutely differently and absolutely globally, and bringing, I fully agree with you that bringing labor to Hungary for short term is important, but for the long term, I think those education changes are also required. So if we are talking about the middle and long term future of Hungary, the education system, the competency based education is something which is with key importance.
I'm conscious of the fact that we're running out of time. The conversation has been absolutely fascinating, and I want to open it up to questions. But just before we do that, there's one area we haven't touched, and it's not directly connected to any of this, except it's part of that challenge opportunity matrix on the wider thing, and that's sustainability and ESG. Because we talk about it at almost every function that we go to. It's becoming increasingly important. So where do we think Hungary is on this road? Because I have to keep it Hungarian, but also, all right, let me phrase it perhaps better than that. Do you think Hungarian companies are in a position to take the opportunities that ESG presents, or are they still just running around like a ostrich from earlier with a head in the sand, not really worried about that future?
They cannot avoid, I would say. Yeah. So there are three types of companies. How they take this ESG matter. One group is the value and purpose-driven companies who are doing it because of their philosophy. The second is the group who are doing it because of the regulations, and the third largest group who is doing it in combined. And if you take the regulatory point first, this is getting serious. So in Hungary, I think we issued a study like a half a year ago, even maybe a year ago, about how the regulations readiness looks like in a comparison to other countries in the world. And Hungary was ranked really high, mainly driven by the National Bank, by the way. Mm-hmm. So the National Bank used to be a lighthouse of this topic, and I'm really objective from this point of view to the government. So I'm really not saying it from politely, but the National Bank did a great job on that. which I'm not sure that the banking colleagues will share my opinion, because they got so many extra burden on the administration on that this was amazing for them to comply with. But this is something. Nevertheless, I think the whole EU-based climate change policies, which were absolutely unrealistic, I think, a year ago, being honest, now became a reality. So the war in Ukraine brought them to a reality, because we do not have any other choice that to speed up our investments and speed up. I'm not sure there is an app. I cannot say you the name of the app, but you can check the real-time consumption of the Hungarian electricity production. And surprisingly, on a sunny day, during the day, the largest percentage of the energy is coming from sun, already in Hungary. Second is nuclear, and the minority is the fossil. And the only thing is, which I see an issue here, that the energy safety became also more important than it used to be, and this will be a burden for the demolition and termination of the fossil power plants. So none of the governments, including Germany, I would say, will risk their energy safety on ESG. But on the long term, I think the investments will multiple than originally planned. So this is one thing. The second are the other content of the ESG, which I think is becoming absolutely a must. So I mentioned, I think, a year ago that it was a KPMG study about that how the economy is changing, and there is a new capitalism. There is not an owner-based capitalism anymore, but there is a stakeholder capitalism. So a top manager currently is doing a significantly more difficult job to comply with all the expectation than 10 years ago, when you had your owner, you had to follow the instructions, and your evaluation was based on whether you achieved the goals or not. Now you have like 7 to 10 stakeholders who you need to comply with their requests. And this is getting even more difficult. And ESG is getting to a major point on the stakeholders' agenda, as you can see. So if you consider your employees, your customers, they are two so strong stakeholder group who can influence your business really heavily. And then ESG is not a value-based agenda only, but it is a really strong business driver and an opportunity. Of course, if you move fast, you will have advantages. And the last comments from my side is the regulation is changing really fast. And just the recently introduced German Supply Chain Act will have a significant impact on the Hungarian suppliers who are delivering products to German companies. And this is already for, I think, all German companies needs to evaluate their suppliers based on ESG principles who have more than 3,000 people, and from 25 it will be 1,000 people. So it's impacting every German company basically.
A German business. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so we were already kind of, adhering to a lot of these principles, because we're part of, a group that has both a very keen adherence to the laws, but also in its value propositions has it in its leading, group values, sustainability in all aspects. So the environmental part, the diversity part, everything is included there. So I would consider Deutsche Telekom to be kind of, a leading group in that space. And also it's easy because the product is relatively clean. Yeah? So it's from a manufacturing perspective not so pressureful. I think the supplier part is really key, because we're in also actually not forced to do sustainability, but more do geopolitics. We were very dependent on China in our supply chain, and that because of all the geopolitical moves has decreased like enormously. Like I think that Ericsson must have gone back to church and thanked the Lord for what happened, because they've never seen so much business coming back as fast as they did in the last few years, and Nokia the same. But like Huawei has really decreased its footprint, and will continue to do so in Deutsche Telekom and in American companies for sure as well. I think Hungary is not so bad from a sustainability perspective. If I compare it to like other countries in the former Eastern European contingent, I think Hungary is doing okay. Maybe not, the leader of the pack, but they're doing a pragmatic job in replacing, let's say, old school utilities with, and they have a clear agenda. They're pushing, the replacement of all the infrastructure with solar energy, regionalized, not only in the big cities. So I think Hungary is doing okay, and perhaps they could do a better job in selling that part of their infrastructure, because if you look at infrastructure and clean energy, like my colleague said, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for us to do perhaps a better job at promoting that, and also encouraging people to use it more. But I've lived in 9 different countries. We lived and worked in 9 different countries, and Hungary is above average, better off than some of the others. So I think that is something that I'm not worried about. Let's say I think it's on the right track, and we could perhaps push it harder, and it will anyway have to be pushed harder now, considering the circumstances. The only thing that is not really happening yet, and that I see, for instance, in the Netherlands, which I guess a completely different world, is that it's more like here I haven't seen so much initiatives where it's democratized, where the individual user can invest in making their house completely clean, and then that is just facilitated. Here it's still very centrally managed, very controlled, and people are lazy. They're not looking around for opportunities to make their house cleaner, or anything they do cleaner, because they're not incentivized to do so. In the Netherlands, if you would buy infrastructure that would make your house completely independent or completely sustainable, you would get money back, or you would just say that the electricity company would be regulated to actually make it attractive for you to do so. And this is something I think that policymakers could look at. And it will take a mind shift. It will take people completely need to rethink the way they do things. But if you start now, then in 10 years from now, you'd be in a good place. Yeah.
It's not my place to present the government, but I think one thing they have done well is the schemes around solar panels for domestic.
Right.
We got those now.
Yeah.
So we should perhaps credit them with that. John, what's your take?
So can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm significantly more frustrated than both of you about this topic. For example, I put solar energy into my house in the UK in 1996. So that was 26 years earlier than the current reimbursement schemes we're talking about. It was subsidised. UK is not known for being the most sunny country in the world, but it powered 70% of our heating, and I see absolutely no reason why that shouldn't be done here. I think we're very, very late, and things need to move much, 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 much quicker here in Hungary. If I look at things like, generating individual households generating solar power, let's stick with solar energy to feed into the grid. That was rolled out in Italy probably 10, 15 years ago. The scheme was stopped probably 5 or 6 years ago. So that train left the station in other European countries, and it hasn't even come to Hungary yet. And there's absolutely no reason with the amount of sunshine we get here that we shouldn't generate a significant proportion of our energy, particularly given the overwhelming dependency that we obviously have on Russia. Not just for gas and oil, but also electricity, because we all know that Pakh is basically a Russian-fueled uranium plant. So I think if the war act as a catalyst for us to get our act together quickly, that would be great. There's a couple of things that, in my understanding, or last time I looked, which was maybe a few months ago, haven't actually even happened yet. So the European directive, it's a directive, it's not optional, on renewable energy hasn't, as far as I know, been implemented yet in Hungary. And locally, each European country can choose how to implement it, but it's a directive. So we should get around to doing that. I think one of my concerns here in Hungary is that we are a little bit, in terms of renewable energy diversification options, we're a bit restricted to solar. So UK obviously has tide, wind, lots of wind, but tide is the one that comes and goes 4 times a day. So there's a lot of power all around the UK which can be harnessed and which can't be harnessed in Hungary. So being a little bit over-reliant on solar and more specifically the storage options for electricity. But even there, I don't see a huge amount of innovation. So if I talk to my friends in California, they're utilizing old mine shafts to raise a big weight in order to drop it during the day to regenerate through kinetic energy, the solar energy that's been gathered during the day. I'm sure we could do that, So I'm a little bit more frustrated on this topic, I have to say.
Wind frustrates. There's a phrase I probably shouldn't say in public. My wife was involved with the. She's a lawyer. She was involved with the financing for probably the last wind farm, which was up on the Austrian border. And I've raised this many times with the government, and their argument has always been that they think you can get more value for your hoof by going down the solar route than you can through wind. But I never understood that they changed the regulations for how you could build a wind farm, and they basically made it impossible to build a wind farm. Now, it is true that Hungary isn't as windy as the UK, but there are options. There are places where it is, you could do it, but it seems to be a bit of a blind spot. I was talking to a different set of lawyers than my wife's 2 weeks ago, and they said that they had begun to hear suggestions that wind would come back on the agenda, but when is a different matter. Ladies and gentlemen, we've done a lot of talking, and you've been very patient, and I did promise you the chance of asking some questions. If you don't have questions, I've still got a bunch of stuff I want to go through with the guys. But we have a phone here at the front. Does anyone have a question for this great brain pool that I have at your disposal? Anyone like to ask anything? Oh, we have a bank question, possibly.
Thank you, and not a bank question, but a question coming from also a large investor and an employer here in Hungary, as we all are. First of all, thank you very much. Fascinating discussion. Very, very refreshing. What I found particularly refreshing was the discussion about the talent pool and the labor market, not centered around the competition, wages, but also how we bring more specialized jobs, more technology-oriented jobs into the Hungary and into our companies, which is something that we are looking into as well. And I would be very interested, as on your thoughts, how you are looking within your companies, measuring the progress and success in that area, because measuring by the number of the new positions and number of new people, this is all what we all do, and we will continue doing, and this is very easy. But based on the discussion, there is another element. How do we measure the maturity and the more value add that is coming to our companies? Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Gentlemen, who would like to?
So we if we're looking at qualifying the business that comes in, we look at not only the headcount clearly, but we measure, I think, like 10 different variables of the type of position that comes in. Is it new tech or old tech? Is it new business, like a different kind of business that we're doing for these customers? We're looking at seniority, so it's gone from like really junior 10 years ago to extremely senior, mainly because it's impossible to find these people in the UK or Germany now. So that, like, we measure them in 7 levels, I think. So it goes from really, like, you know, just came fresh out of university, or never mind university, just coming, you know, and then to really, really senior with multiple levels of specialization. That would be like the 7th level, or managerial leadership positions. And I can say that the trend is dramatic over the last few years, like really, really shifting from, it was maybe 5% of that very senior level that was coming in before, and now it's almost 20. So it's really, really gone very fast, and I expect that, you know, that is actually where the problem is, partially because the supply on that spectrum is very low in any country, but also in Hungary, which is now already undergoing all these dynamics. That's the toughest, not only to recruit, but to keep. You know, if you have people like that, hold on to them for dear life, come and kiss their forehead every day, you know, pay whatever, but don't lose them, because they're very, very valuable. And that's, I think we've been too lazy with that as well, but just really focusing on the retention and the fostering of talent.
Yeah, I would just add to that, you know, we're in a seller's market, so, you know, you're not really the boss. Your senior engineers are the, you know, are controlling you more than the other way around. And I think, to your question, Veronica, the way that we would measure is more the value that is output by the person or the group. So if this is a team building software, then it's the revenue generated by the software they build. So, you know, build a small, compact, self-sufficient team with your UX designer, product manager, back-end, front-end tester, and then it's the revenue they generate. And if you can, and we don't really measure the number of positions and headcount, because if you can generate the same amount of revenue with a smaller team, then obviously the value output is higher. And, you know, I've been going through the motions of basically releasing manual test engineers in order to replace them with engineers who will automate testing, to ensure that, you know, you can generate more value by automating the testing, and, you know, sorry, Mr. Manual Guy, you know, you can go and work for someone else. And I think that if I looked at other areas, so, you know, if this was ERP, I know that to hire a senior NetSuite person in the States is 180K. And obviously you won't pay $180,000 in here, but you might have to create those people, grow them, provide a career path from, you know, someone who's doing AP in a shared service team, but is using your ERP system, and then has the aptitude and the attitude and the kind of ambition and commitment. You take 2 or 3, 4 of those and you grow them, and you get a team for the cost of your one person in the States. And it's going to take time and commitment, but you demonstrate that as an employer, you're interested in improving the life of your person, and, you know, over the years that it takes to grow them into that senior technical resource, you know, they obviously get a benefit from it, and they appreciate that and stay with you and deliver value to you as well. So that's kind of the way we're playing the game, and I think, just going back to education, I think that kind of organic upskilling is almost like our debt to the country, because you just can't expect teachers to do this. You know, you just can't expect it. They're out of this area. And I think as well, and I know that all of us have the same attitude, because we all work together and help each other. And just to go back to a sailing term, you know, when the tide comes in, all boats rise. So if we can all help each other, I don't mind losing the odd person to Erik, because, you know, he's a friend of mine. And I think that, you know, as Hungary improves and we upgrade the population, I think actually we can help each other through events like this, to be honest.
That career path, I think, is the really important thing, isn't it? That people have to be able to perceive that they can develop within an organisation. Rezső,
that's the most important factor for the hiring, I would say, and also incorporated with technology. So if we would like to hire somebody who is a talent, then 3 things. One is the salary, of course, But the second is how they can develop, and how they can somehow develop their future skills embedded with technology and all the competencies, and this is I think key, and we measure it. So for any new job creation, we expect from our teams to provide us with a expected value addition, which is measured quite seriously, and that's the way how you can enforce them, that they are they are thinking both in hires and in technology developments, because otherwise they will not meet the critical KPI with a new hire. And I'm a big friend of automation, honestly. We robotize a lot as well, but robotizing is for me the second choice. So if you can automate, then first automate, and what you cannot automate, you can use robots, which are basically equally digitized people. They are not cheap, by the way. So, but the current labor market, I think it's putting them to a more advantageable position. But I think those are the key words. That if we are significantly can more easily hire for positions which are something for the future, and for the more traditional business, when there is not always possible to somehow restructure the delivery model to a more future-oriented, technology-based one, is significantly more difficult.
Can I challenge you guys a little bit?
Please do.
This whole entrepreneurial, let's say, okay, the more value you generate, if you keep the cost lower. So my experience with that is if you localize that too much, so if you do it like Hungarians can sell their services to the rest of the group, and then if you hire less people, better revenue, blah, 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 you also incentivize them to become very selfish in their behavior and not group thinking anymore. So like, I actually canceled a few of those models because it ended up, they got too entrepreneurial, and they ended up infighting with Slovaks and Russians, and and the customer was not benefiting from it at all. Yeah, so I actually kind of had to change it to a more group level KPI, saying if all of us win, if the whole company, if Shell wins buying our services, still happy to sign up, then all those other factors count. Then I incentivize them. But it's the whole kind of, just get the business, and then if the lower cost, the more efficient, then it doesn't matter if you grow in headcount. That stimulated the wrong behaviors, because that it just to kind of say, okay, I have my little island, and I'm going to optimize my island, my testers, and I'm doing really well, and screw everybody else. No, I said screw. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's not 4 letters.
Right. It is.
You counted. Thank you, Veronica, for that.
Should I just answer to that? So,
we could be here some time.
Because I actually play on that. So one agile concept is self-sufficient teams, and I actually play on dividing up the work to not have them competing against each other, but have them being able to fully own and be empowered for their work. So, for example, I kind of inherited some engineers in Germany to a predominantly Hungarian team. And one thing I did was divert them onto a different piece of work so that we didn't have a team spanning Germany and Hungary. So I actually kind of exploit that kind of self-sufficient team concept. The only thing that I find holds it back a little bit is, funnily enough, the fact that Hungarians are cost effective. So sometimes it works against us that we're too cheap. And this is why I just wish the foreign would kind of appreciate a little bit more, because if you're trying to demonstrate that value, sometimes being a bit too much on the cheap side works against you. It's a bit like difference between a Ford and a BMW, although Fords are always better.
But remember, no team is an island. We had another question.
Hello, my name is Beata Rakoszegeti. I'm from the Dutch Chamber, and I would like to have a question regarding the ESG topic. I think that the companies need to do their best to meet the guidelines and the disciplines and the directives, but I think as a person you can do a lot more because, I think a personal behavior is really very important. And whether you, as a top executive, are role models for your colleagues, so you can talk about what you do as your personal life to live a more sustainable life, and whether you have any internal programs to educate your employees so that when they go home, they don't just feel as a must in the corporation to do what they need to do regarding meeting the ESG targets, but as a person, they get passionate about being a greener life. Thank you.
You can go. I'm not an executive, so it's clearly not.
So not talking about your car then.
You are a role model there, Rob. So, I mean, I can talk about myself. So I've recycled everything manically since the late 90s. I made sure that, so I've run 5 centres here now in Budapest for the last 16 years. I've made sure that recycling is very much introduced. I've kind of gone round and reminded people if someone throws the wrong thing in the bin, I've told them to take it out and wash it and recycle it, which is sometimes not highly appreciated.
You go around the building and tell people. Take that out.
I've introduced, coffee recycling, for example, coffee capsules, stuff like that. We're very much remote-centric, so we calculate the hundreds of millions of tons of CO2 that we save people by not riding into the office. I take public transport because I think it's better. But I would just say that ESG goes a bit beyond that. So it's kind of taken over from CSR. So the big CSR push we've kind of obviously had, this year is helping Ukraine. So I've set up, partnerships with organizations and made sure that at scale we can channel donations, set up, rotas for ferrying Ukrainian families, usually not from the border, funnily enough, but usually around Pest-Megyar. That's where the need mainly is. Looking after Ukrainian children at the Box Center. We've implemented 2 days a year of volunteer time to make sure that we've got literally 1,200 days of time available, and then set up the rotas. And I've tried to do everything en masse so that it's not just point-to-point solutions. It's not just, here's my mobile number, call me. It's like, no. This has got to be for like hundreds of people. Otherwise, it's not going to scale. And then I've also pushed that out into the company to make sure we've got, $25,000 donated to help Mondak has in the 8th district, which goes a long, long way. It's kind of 4 times their annual budget. And so stuff like this, but I would just say that, I've basically got 3 jobs and this is on top of it. So it's got to be kept manageable, and you've got to find the people to delegate it out and spread the passion amongst the company.
I'm really glad, John, that you mentioned that ESG is more than just the capital E.
I know it's more.
Yeah. Talking about the S, the social part, I think diversity and inclusion is a topic which is equally important as the E, capital of the ESG. And even in this month, I think this is a special month for this topic. Talking about diversity and inclusion, I think it's something which we can do a lot in Hungary. And if all of the companies are driving it, and all the CEOs driving it like role models and advocates of this topic within an organization, I think we can make an impact. And we joined all the initiatives in Hungary, from Egyenlítőtől nyitottak vagyunk to all those organizations, because I think the business community has an important role in this and avoiding those situations which I think none of us are proud of that Hungary made. So I think it's really important that we keep this on our agenda, all business leaders, and that we build islands first within our organization, that people are feeling when they entering your doors, that they get to a new island. And when we have a lot of islands, we can connect them. And once you connected those islands, you maybe change the ocean as well. So it's something which I would keep on the agendas. And of course, not saying that the other ESG initiatives are not with the same importance, but this is something which I think, especially in Hungary, is should be in the focus.
I applaud you for that, and I strongly agree. I think that we as business leaders around the table are not courageous enough in standing our grounds where it comes to diversity and the values that we represent as the groups that we are. We have to play it. We cannot ignore the fact that there's a clash on those topics in this country, not only this country. But we need to stand our ground there, and when all the turmoil around this new law that was introduced last year, we made it really clear that we as a group believe in diversity on all levels: age, gender, sexuality, religion, all of it, and that there will always be a safe place for people with talent and the right mindset, independent of their background. And I think I agree with you. We must play a role there, but we must do it together, because it's not without consequences sometimes. So we must believe in our joint strength in that case. From a sustainable leadership example perspective, I have to admit I'm not driving an electric car yet. But as a group, we have decided to replace the fleets by the end of next year, I think, all with electric cars. But we also, the side effect of that is that it's quite expensive, but also that the mode of transportation and flexibility becomes different. So we have 5 locations, and people travel between those, and now it takes double or triple the amount of time to get to the same location. Yeah, so there are consequences to that as well that we need to work through. Yes, we do have all those programs, recycling. We do have, I think, a very strong social responsibility calendar in Deutsche Telekom, sponsoring both diversity group, we sponsor Roma schools in teaching them how to code Java when they're 7 years old, to speaking English, which is like what my lesson in life is. If you learn technology and your languages from a young age, it doesn't, you have the same chances as everybody else. And so I strongly advocate that as well. I would say our group is a leader in CSR and in ESG. So I'm very proud to be a part of that group, and we have a very strong role as individual leaders. Especially, we have the platform, we have the background, we have the ears of not only it's easy to talk as a group of expats together, but you also have the ears of the government, of the institutions, and of your employees. So you have a responsibility to lead by example. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
Yeah. It turns out I am going to answer that question after all. When we first started the Expat CEO Gala and the award, one of the buzzwords that came very, very early through that was diversity in all its forms, and we started to hear people talking about expat CEOs being ambassadors for diversity. And I think that's a really, really important role. And Rezső, you're a very good example of Hungarians who are doing it as well. But I think it's important that we as expats project our values, and we can add something. And it's where we come with a different mindset. I'm not saying it's better, but we come with a different series of outside influences. I want to give one very quick example to that. When I first came here, worked for another newspaper, nothing to do with Tamás or Balázs, as an editor, and my CEO was a Hungarian, and the very first International Women's Day we had, he brought all of the women presents, which I thought was a lovely gesture. Being British, we weren't really aware of International Women's Day. Wasn't something that I think we'd ever marked as a company when I was back in the UK. But the thing that really struck me about this was that the present he bought all the women were baking gloves and baking aprons. So I think and it was only when I pointed out to him that maybe that wasn't the best message to send that it occurred to him, because he had grown up in, one of the things I always say about Hungarians is it's a very paternalistic society, and I suspect that's also true of the region. So we can and should, I think, demonstrate others. We're getting very close to the end of this. Is there one last question, perhaps, from the floor? Anyone desperate to ask something? Just wait for the microphone very quickly.
Thank you. So I'm Kari Radnai from Anderson, Hungary. You were touching on the energy mix and the energy prices, but just wanted to ask you how important the energy price for your business currently. So is it like the air pollution that we all don't like, that it's and we would like that somebody fixes it, or this is really impacts your business?
It hugely impacts our business, and especially the hikes or the cost of hosting, or the cost of anything that is dependent on utilities is the prices are going up so fast right now. We have to transform it into price hikes with our customers as well. So it's we are now proactively going for large accounts that are not fully cloud-based. So anything that is, let's say, still dependent on what we're hosting for them or partially hosting for them is getting challenged. So it's a huge challenge for our commercial teams, because they're not used to going back to customers with running contracts and telling them, we're going to have to up the price. And it's not just the utilities; it's also the price hikes in the salaries that are actually driving the cost up so much right now. So we have no alternative but to revisit the reality. Thankfully, we're not the only ones. Like all other large IT firms would go back, or probably other companies as well, would go back to their customers saying, we cannot sustain this reality. We have to renegotiate, and it's going to dominate the conversation with our customer partially for the rest of the year, probably.
So for us, Károly, only a very minor impact in terms of running the business, but the impact is more indirect on the purchasing parity of the salaries of the employees. So I've got no issue with wage inflation, because like I mentioned, I think we should be fighting on the quality side. And I don't really see why an engineer in Germany earns, 3 times as much as an engineer in Hungary. But with the rising fuel costs, that takes away the positive impact of wage inflation, what I would see as positive impact. So that's the only impact, indirect impact on the value of our employees' salaries, basically.
As a consultant, mainly indirect impacts, but quite a few of them. So the clients have issues which we can support them, but other clients have opportunities through this new reality in the energy sector. So I think it's a mixed impact, and the salary inflation, of course, hitting us really heavily. So I think as everybody in the industry are looking for opportunities, and high prices are always triggering investments. So this is the only good thing that I think we are more enforced for technology, and also the clients. So I saw some really nice and good recent examples when new production is coming to Hungary. The level of technology is increasing from budget discussion to the other budget discussion, because the returns are there. So if they make a new calculation for the returns, they can even upskill or upgrade the technology level to a newest level because of the higher salaries and demand issues on the labor market.
Thank you, Rezső. There is so much more to talk about. I wanted to discuss the fact that the government has 7 ministries that kind of touch on business, and whether that's confusing.
No problem. I think the only people who can answer your question was not invited. So.
And there's a ministry missing as well, don't forget.
Yes. Well, at least one. But we really have to wrap it up there, I think. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. We've lost a few. We always do, because people are busy and need to get out. I hope that you found it a valuable discussion, that you got some insights that perhaps weren't at least top of mind. You're all intelligent people, and you're all following the same problems. But we'll look to do this again, I guess, in the autumn probably, and we'll hope to welcome you back there. My thanks once again to our wonderful panel, to John, Rezső, and Erik. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.